Thank you everybody for coming. Welcome to the training on the performance measure collection for 2022. Most of you know who I am. I'm Carmen Sanchez, the lead for the parent program. And with me are Elaine Carlson, Carrie Willis, and Mariel McKinnon, our contractors for the performance measure collection. Off the script, Brad Keller is also with CIP and he's here with us too. We will have time for questions at the end, but you can also type your questions in the chat space. And if it's an appropriate time to answer those, we'll answer them as the presentation goes along. We will be recording this presentation so people can review it later. Thank you. So for the purposes of the purpose of this training is to demystify the process of collecting the program measures and clarify what's expected in the 2022 data collection. While most of the training is intended for the projects chosen for the performance measure work this year, all parent program projects can benefit from listening to the training. We also want to stress that it's okay if everything isn't clear for you, especially those of you who may be doing it for the first time. If you're one of the projects chosen, Elaine, Carrie, and Marielle are always available to answer your questions. In addition, you also have the expertise of your regional parent technical assistance centers who can provide you with information and some resources. And then the parent program projects have done a fabulous job with the data collection. Every single year we've done it, and I know you'll do a fabulous job in 2022. So let me step back and answer the unspoken question, why performance measurement? Well, it's required by the federal government under the Government Performance and Results Act, which we fondly call GPRA. The purpose of GPRA is to make sure that the programs funded by the federal government actually work. You can see from this slide the criteria that the Office of Management and Budget uses to rate programs. So they rate the programs as effective, moderately effective, adequate, inadequate, or results not determined. However, within that, each agency in the federal government determines how they will rate their programs, and even within each agency, such as the Department of Education, individual offices have determined their own measures. So within the Office of Education and the Office of Special Education Programs, we've used the same measures for determining program effectiveness now for many years, and many of you are familiar with them. The process that OSEP uses involves having what we call short and long-term measures of performance. The short-term measures are more related to output, and they're also related to the process you use in doing your work. They focus on the qualities of the services that our programs provide, including the cost. The long-term measures are more outcome-oriented. That is, they focus on how the recipients of the services you provide, that is the families and the youth, how they respond to those services. But more importantly, short-term measures are collected and reported every year, while the long-term measures are reported on only every 2 years. So please keep this in mind when we discuss the short and long-term measures for the parent program. So I'm going to be reading this slide. You know most of the 3 of the 4 short-term measures because we ask that you provide information that aligns with the program performance measures in your annual report. Specifically, you provide information about your project measures that align with the 3 short-term annual program measures of quality, relevance, and usefulness. We sometimes refer to these as QRU measures. You will continue to report on these project measures that align to the program measures, but what we're discussing today is the program measure collection carried out by the CIP with your support. Notice in the wording here on the screen that for the first 2 measures, quality and relevance, it's independent review panel that determines the program measure ratings in the program measure collection. CIP is responsible for assembling that independent review panel and providing them with the instructions for rating the quality, relevance, and usefulness of the services. As we will discuss, the review panel will base their ratings on information provided by the centers that are chosen. So it's the information that you provide them that determines quality, relevance, and usefulness. Notice too in the screen we've references materials and products. This is wording that goes back over a decade, and we recognize that over time, The only way we can get to those judgments is by reviewing the services provided by the centers. Note too that by only reviewing services, we acknowledge that many of the products parent centers use are developed by others. For example, you might be using providing a training on an IEP, but you're actually using the materials done by NICHE many years ago. The training you're providing is the service, while the materials you use from NICHE were the products. So let me read the actual wording of the first two measures. Measure 1.1 of 4 of the 4 short-term measures. The percentage of materials used by parent training and information centers program projects deemed to be of high quality by an independent review panel of experts qualified to review the substantive content of the products or services. The second measure is the percentage of parent training and information center program products and services deemed to be of high relevance to educational and early intervention policy or practice by an independent review panel of experts qualified to review the substantive content of the products or services. I also just want to highlight that even though we use the words Parent Training Information Center program, that does include the community parent resource centers. So we're including here both the PTIs and the CPRCs. Here's the wording for the third and the fourth short-term program measures. Measure 1.3 of 4, the percentage of all parent training and information center program products and services deemed by an independent review panel of qualified experts to be useful to improve educational or early intervention policy or practice. And then the last one, an index of the federal cost per unit of output provided by the parent training and information center program. For the fourth measure, the wording refers to an index. The use of the word index emphasizes that the number isn't really a dollar amount per se, since it's almost really impossible to determine the actual cost of the services provided. Rather, it's an index or a way of seeing the number of services relative to the program funding and how that changes over time. We'll talk about that more in a little bit. So there are 2 long-term performance measures that are reported again, as I mentioned, every 2 years. Both of them are about how families respond to the services provided and how youth respond to the services provided if the youth are included. The first measure is about what families learn about their idea rights and responsibilities, and the second is about their ability to work with others in order to help their children. Remember, these are long-term measures which are reported only every 2 years, and this year is one of those years. So the survey reporting you all just finished will not be reported this year. So we have the data for 2021, we won't have it for 2022. Here is the actual wording of both measures. Measure 2.1, the percentage of parents receiving special education parent information center services who report enhanced knowledge of IDEA rights and responsibilities. And measure, the second long-term measure, is the percentage of parents receiving special education parent information center services who report having enhanced capacity to work with schools and service providers effectively in meeting the needs of their children. So, how are the measures judged? What does it mean to have a high quality service? OSEP has determined that there are 2 dimensions for quality: substance and communication. The substance dimension is, does the content delivered through the service reflect evidence of conceptual soundness and quality grounded in legislation or policy? The communication dimension is the content delivered through the service presented in such a way so as to be clearly understood, as evidenced by being well organized, free of editorial errors, and appropriately formatted. So the independent panel of reviewers judges the quality of a service by scoring each dimension on a 4-point scale. They go from 0, which is very low, 1 is moderately low, 2 is moderately high, and 3 is very high. In addition, the score for the substance dimension is double weighted, which means that the services can receive 0, 2, 4, or 6 points for substance. Together, the 2 dimensions can add up to as many as 9 points, and all scores of 6 and higher are considered high quality. So what does it mean to have a highly relevant service? OSEP has determined that there are 3 dimensions for relevance: need, pertinence, and reach. The need dimension is, does the content delivered through the service attempt to solve an important problem or deal with a critical issue? The pertinence dimension is, does the content delivered through the service address a problem or issue recognized as important by the target audience? And the reach dimension is, to what extent is the content delivered through the service applicable to diverse segments of the target audiences? The independent panel reviewers judged the relevance of a service by scoring each dimension on a 4-point scale. Again, they range from 0, very low, to 1, moderately low, to 2, moderately high, and 3, very high. Together, the 3 dimensions can add up to, again, as many as 9 points, and again, all scores of 6 and higher are considered highly relevant. So, what does it mean to have a highly useful service? OSEP has determined that there are 2 dimensions for usefulness: ease and suitability. The ease dimension is, does the content delivered through the service address a problem or an issue in an easily understood way, with directions or guidance regarding how the content can be used to address the problem or issue? And the suitability dimension is, does the service provide the target audiences with information or resources that can be used again or in different ways to address a problem or issue? And again, the independent panel reviewers judges the usefulness of a service by scoring each dimension on a 4-point scale: 0, very low, to 1, moderately low, 2, moderately high, and 3, very high. In addition, the score for the suitability dimension is double weighted, which means the service can receive 0, 2, 4, or 6 points for suitability. And together, again, the 2 dimensions can add up to as many as 9 points, and a score of 6 or higher are considered highly useful. Measuring cost. The short-term program performance measures involve a cost measure. As you can see on the screen, the measure is calculated by taking the total number of services provided by the program and dividing by the annual program costs. The services that we count are the training and individual assistance services provided to individuals and attendance at individual meetings. The total cost of the program for the past few years has been steady at approximately $27,411,000. You provided the Center for Parent Information and Resources with the annual count of services back in November, and thank you for submitting that information. And it's this number, aggregated across all the parent centers, that is used in the calculation. Therefore, it's important that when you submit your data to the CPIR in November, that you provide the most accurate numbers possible. The long-term measures are calculated from the results of the program measure surveys, which again, you report to the CPIR in shortly thereafter, sometime in November, December. The sampling method used by the CPIR assures that the responses are as representative as possible of the parents served by the parent centers across the entire program. For the long-term measure by the parents' understanding of their IDEA rights and responsibilities, the measure is calculated from the response to 2 questions. The first question is, the information and support you received from the parent center met your needs. And the second question is, you were able to understand the information you received from the parent center. Since the responses vary on a 4-point scale from strongly disagree to strongly agree, only those responses that are agree and strongly agree are counted as indicating an increased knowledge of rights and responsibilities. The total number of positive responses across both questions are then divided by the total number of responses to arrive at a percentage. The second long-term measure about working together, which measures the parents' increased capacity to work together with professionals and providers, is calculated again from 2 responses to 2 questions on the program measure survey. The first question is, you are prepared to use the information you receive from the parent center. And the second question is, you feel confident in your ability to work with schools and service providers to meet the needs of your child. Since the responses again vary on a 4-point scale from strongly disagree to strongly agree, only those responses that are agree and strongly agree are counted as indicating an increased capacity to work with professionals and providers. The total number of positive responses across both questions are then divided by the total number of responses to arrive at a percentage. So this past year, what was the methodology? This slide details the parent-centered data collection methodology we used last year. The centers, there were 30 centers that were chosen to provide data for the program's GPRA measures during that 2021 data collection cycle. And these 30 centers are not included in the pool for selection this year, because a center cannot be chosen 2 years in a row to participate in the data collection. Also, if you were a brand new PTI last year, you were not included in the pool, but you are included this year in the pool if you were brand new PTI last year. So here's the results of the 2021 performance measures. In 2021, we met the target for quality, relevance, and usefulness. For quality, 2 of the 30 sample services did not meet the threshold for high quality, which is why we're at 93.3. For relevance, only 1 of the 30 sample services did not meet the threshold for high relevance. And for usefulness, 2 out of the 3 sample services did not meet the threshold for high usefulness. Please know that these are very high targets, and that sometimes, depending on the sample size, we may sometimes not meet all the targets. Sometimes we get, 100, and sometimes we don't. We realize that many of you have also provided multiple descriptions over multiple years, and that some of you have been chosen almost every other year. But it's important that you approach every service description with renewed energy and attention so that you can do justice to the excellence of your service. Again, there will be considerable TA available to you, but you do need to ask for the TA and to take advantage of it in order to make your service description really do honor to the work that you're doing. So please pay attention when you're selecting the 3 services you might be submitted and writing the best possible description. I also just want to show you, we have here the cost, the enhanced knowledge, and then enhanced capacity. The cost is 14.5, and again, it's an index, which actually I think went down from last year, even though we're still in the process of determining the baseline. But the long-term measures, again, these are very high numbers. Enhanced knowledge, it's 95.3, and enhanced capacity is 90.3, as we worked at setting a baseline. So this ends a part of the training about the GPRA measures generally and the results of the 2021 collection. The rest of the training is really most relevant to those that were included in the 2022 sample and the TA centers who will be supporting them. So I'm now going to turn my training over to Elaine, Carrie, and Marielle. But if those of you who just wanted to see what happened in 2021 and submitted, wanted to see the data, you're free to get off now too, if you like.
Okay, hi everyone. So we're going to start with the cost, rights, and working together measures, because then we can quickly set those aside since we won't be doing additional collection for those. But the program's cost and long-term GPRA measures, they do not require the centers to send any additional information to CIP. So the work that was going to be done on those measures has already been done. We will use the data you already submitted to CPIR to calculate the cost measure and the long-term measures. And as Carmen described, the cost measure will be calculated according to the established methodology using data from the fall parent-centered data collection. And then baselines for the long-term measure will be determined based on results of the questions on the program measures survey. But again, like I said, the most important point being you're done with that part and you don't need to do anything else for now. So we want to talk a little bit more now about the QRU methodology for 2022. I will start by saying there are no changes in the methodology this year. So if you participated last year or the year before, there are no changes. And so I think that people should become increasingly familiar with this process. And so hopefully you'll feel comfortable with it. The data collection process for the parent centers for the QRU will occur between now and April 18th. So 29 centers from the CPRCs and the PTIs were selected to participate, and they were notified of their participation. Now those centers will send a list of their 3 most effective or best services that were first delivered in fiscal year 2021, which means between October 1st, 2020 and September 30th of 2021. Then SIP will randomly select one of those 3 services. Each center will then prepare and submit a service description for the one sampled service. And then centers that were included in last year's sample or funded for the first time, as Carmen said, are not included in the 2022 sample.
So what is the service?
So when you think about submitting your center's top 3 services, you need to know how OSEP defines a service. It's work performed by an OSEP-funded project to provide information to a specific audience relevant to the improvement of outcomes for children with disabilities. And here are some examples of services that we see frequently from the Parent Center program: conducting training, leading and convening informational meetings, responding to inquiries from a targeted population, IEP clinics, phone support, IEP meeting support, and intensive TA to families. It's important to note that your website is not considered a service, but otherwise services include most of the things that your parent center does. This is a quick timeline for the 2022 data collection. So in January, you were all notified that you were selected for the 2022 data collection. If you have not received such a notification, then you can say, I wasn't selected this year, because you should have gotten that email by now. We ask that you upload your list of 3 services to the SIP website by February 21st. And Marielle will show you the website in a few minutes and give you some information about how to do that. Then the week of March 21st, we'll notify you via email which of your 3 services was sampled. You'll have from then until April 18th to upload your service description guide and any supporting materials for that one service that was selected. And that will also go up onto the SIP website, and we'll do a demonstration of that later on in this webinar.
So if I'm a parent center, how should I pick my top 3?
So let me stress that you pay particular attention to the details on this slide. So when you submit your list of top 3 services, please be specific. Don't say workshops. Pick an individual workshop, or don't write telephone assistance without qualifying the precise type of assistance you're talking about. And be careful about accompanying materials. We recommend that you choose 3 services that have accompanying materials to support the services. So documents, checklists, web pages, worksheets, they're preferable to services that have no supporting materials. We do ask that you limit, though, the supporting materials to no more than 5 files. If you have a recording of a training, include a link. If you have PowerPoint slides, you could include those too. But we find that reviewers really value the attachments. That said, the description guide that you submit must also stand alone, because the reviewers are not required to look at accompanying materials, although historically they typically do.
Mm-hmm. So how would they write a good description?
So I think first take the time necessary to develop a complete, clear, and accurate service description. The document is extremely important. Again, it's the primary document reviewed by the panel, and the quality of the written description of the services clearly correlates to a higher rating by the reviewers. So please note the tips mentioned on this slide. Read the criterion carefully and respond fully and clearly. Sometimes there are 2-part questions, so please make sure that you're addressing both parts of the question. Guide your reader to the response criteria so that they can easily see how your service meets the specific criteria. We recommend you share your description with others so they can ask clarifying questions and correct any inadvertent mistakes. And then proofread. Mistakes in spelling, grammar, etc., can be distracting to the readers.
So how can I get help?
Please don't hesitate for asking for advice and assistance. It is a sign of strength, not a sign of weakness. There are exemplary service descriptions that are on the CPIR Learning Hub. One of them is annotated, so it goes through and indicates what it is that makes that a high quality submission. The regional PTACs are also available to provide technical assistance and to help you write a strong service description. And you can always arrange a conference call with CIP if you need extra help in preparing your description guide or your list of 3 services. Okay, so we wanted to share some examples of description guide entries that were favorably reviewed in the past. This can give you an idea of the types of content that the reviewers are expecting. So the first quality measure pertains to content that reflects relevant legislation or policy. So here's what one center wrote in the past. Our state special education law follows largely 2 legislative rules, number 51 and number 52. Our organization bases the content we deliver in our IEP assistance and training service on Rule 51, the state's special education regulations, as well as IDEA Part B. The information we train and consult on mainly comes from sections 003, 006 to 009, and 014 to 015 of Rule 51. And then the grantee described what those specific sections of the law were. And you'll see here that they cited specific state legislation and the sections of that legislation that were tied to the content of the service that they were describing. So you can understand here the level of detail that they're providing. The second quality measure assesses whether the service is presented in a way that is clearly understood. So in these examples, the center wrote, quote, the materials we've created in-house are shared and edited by staff to make sure the content is appropriate and will be easily understood by the parents we serve. Another center wrote, the webinars and presentations are adapted for the size, location, experience of the audience. In a third entry, a grantee wrote, staff use multiple adult learning methods and diverse interactions with the participants, such as icebreaker activities, PowerPoints, videos, interactive activities to engage participants with encouraging questions, and sharing experiences related to content.
The first relevance measure assesses whether a service content addresses an important problem or critical issue. Reviewers appreciate getting very specific evidence. For example, you see in, if we can click, more than 78% of our callers are seeking information about the IEP process is one example that you see here. And then you see here too, that kind of specificity in the larger bubble. The content of the 3-part webinar series includes key elements of the information needed by parents whose parents, 1, whose children are struggling but have not yet been found eligible, 2, whose children are newly identified, or 3, whose children have been served on an IEP for some time and have yet to understand all that occurs in the process. The webinars include information to increase parents' knowledge and provide information about their roles and responsibilities at each stage in the process. Examples of elements addressed include child find, referral, evaluation, and reevaluation, eligibility, required elements of the IEP, and so on. So you can really see in here the specificity of the problems to prove that the training is relevant. Another example, the second relevance measure assesses ways that the center ensures that the problem or issue is recognized as important. So centers often use this opportunity to report results from satisfaction surveys. For example, Webinar evaluation responses provide essential insights into how families regarded the information they received. The data reflects a high degree of satisfaction, particularly demonstrating that the participants view the information they receive as important, useful, and relevant. The following data represents parents and family members who participated in the webinars. Using the 4-point Likert scale, the information was useful, 90% agreement. The webinar information is relevant to my needs, an average of 3.36, 88% agreement. The material used is of high quality, 3.76, 94% agreement. Again, you're noticing here the very, very specificity to get to the criterion. And then the third element of relevance is to show that the content is applicable to diverse audiences. In the examples shown here, the center wrote, we provide technical assistance in the language preferred by the parent, either by a staff member or with the assistance of a professional interpreter. In the second example, when preparing for the presentation, our staff review any available data on the families who have registered. Presenters can tailor the content if they see that the audience will have a high concentration of a certain subset of students, such as parents of transition-age youth or students with behavior challenges. And then in the last example, the live stream trainings allow participants to view the workshop from their home or other location. The live stream training is recorded and archived on our website so that it can be viewed by people unable to attend. So you see here that they touched on language diversity, the data of the families, and that the families might be in different locations and therefore have access to this.
So now we want to give you some examples related to usefulness. The first usefulness measure assesses whether the service's content addresses the problem in an easily understood way. So one center wrote, we created an index for the SEA documents to assist parents in using the rules and regulations. We're always remaking our documents based on information and feedback received from parents and professionals and as the regulations are updated. Another center wrote, we have a wide variety of documents that can be sent to a wide variety of parents in Spanish and English who may be at varying degrees of knowledge in the special education system. Some forms are interactive and some have very basic knowledge, including the very best of what to do next format. A third center wrote, we provide the IEP presentation in multiple formats, lengths, and experience levels. So the second usefulness measure assesses how the content can be used again. In this example, the center wrote, the materials in the workshop packet can be used as an ongoing reference for parents to reinforce the information learned at the training. Additionally, we have an archived recording of the tips and tools training available on the website that parents can view at any time convenient to them. So this is a screenshot of the Learning Hub from CPIR. The examples from 3 PTIs and 1 CPRC from last year, each from a different region, have been posted to the website. So in addition, your regional PTAC can provide you with several years' worth of exemplars. The Learning Hub also includes an example of a service description guide, as I mentioned, that has been annotated to highlight the most important content. All the executive directors and project directors have been given a username and a password to the Learning Hub. So those associated with the chosen parent centers will be assigned this training and the exemplars on the Hub. If you have any questions, Miriam, I think is available to help with access to that information. If you are unclear about what your center is doing with the GPRA work this year, you can feel free to contact Carrie or Muriel or myself at any time. We're here to help. We don't want you to spin your wheels if you're having trouble with something that just doesn't make any sense. So these are the phone numbers for Muriel and Carrie. Carrie's is 240-342-0301, and Muriel is 240-790-2987. And then you can also respond to the CPIR email, which is where you've been getting your communications already. You can just hit reply and write back to us, and we monitor that email so we can help you that way as well. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Marielle, and she is going to do a demonstration of the SIP website where you will be uploading your lists of 3 services and also your description guide after one of those services is sampled. Marielle?
Thank you, Elaine. Hi, this is Marielle. So as Elaine mentioned, I will be going through the SIP site to show you how to navigate it so that you can submit your list of services and then your service descriptions and supporting materials. Okay, so this is the SIP site, and many of you may be familiar with it. So when you get to the main page, you'll want to click on Log In. And here you'll be prompted to log in. So every user is going to go down and click Forgot Password. And then once you click Forgot Password, you will use your email address in order to receive an email that allow you to reset your password. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what that looks like here. So it'll be an email like this, and it will have your username and a new password for you to use temporarily until it takes you to the actual page where you will create a unique password. And you can definitely copy that temporary password that is generated through the email, and you'll press login. And so this is the page where you're actually going to create your unique password. So current password is going to be that temporary one that you were sent via email. And then this field and the field below, you'll be creating a new password and confirming. And then you'll go on to click Reset Password and continue to home page. So this is what it looks like when you get logged in, and there are 3 tiles here. So the first 2 tiles are just for other services that we provide, but the tile that is going to be relevant to the data collection process is Conduct GPRA Reporting. And then you'll see a QRU Review tile. You'll click on that. And then QRU Review 2022. And as you can see, there aren't really too many options to choose from. We've tried to tailor your access and permissions to show you really only what's relevant for you to navigate through the site to get to where you need to go. And then Stakeholder Panel. And then Parent Center Documents. And then here you see there are 2 folders, Grantee documents and guidance documents. The guidance documents folder contains a screenshot of the form or in PDF version, and it's also going to have today's recorded webinar as well as transcript information in the guidance documents folder. And in the Grantee documents folder, this is the folder where every grantee will click on to locate the individual grant for their center, or the individual folder for their center. And here you can see there are the folders already. So in order to upload information, you will just go ahead and click. You'll locate the folder for your grant. You can find it by your center name or also your grant number. And we're going to use the first one as an example. And then here you can either upload or drag and drop files. So I'll go ahead and do the upload version. And then as you can see here, you can upload your service description guide, and then you can upload your attachment 1. And so we do have an email that you will receive as it pertains to the naming convention for the files that you're uploading. It does really help the reviewers if all grantees provide their documents with a certain naming convention. So here's an example of what that's going to look like. So you'll update your service description guide. And again, you can name it attachment 1, attachment 2, and so on up to no more than 5. And again, this is going to be for your service description guide, which you'll upload after. You're going to do your list of services first. So you can just label that list of services. And that is really it. If you have any questions at this time, we can take a quick break if there's anything anyone would like to see again. But this concludes the demo portion of our training. And I'm going to go ahead and hand it back over to Paloma.
Mariel, I do see we do have one individual with a hand raised. It looks like Joe LaBelle has a question. Joe, please feel free to come off of mute and let us know what the question is.
Thanks so much. Very simple. I was wondering if we're going to get an email for verification that the files were uploaded appropriately, or just we see them in there and they're good to go.
You see them in there and they're good to go. But if you have any doubts or have any question or anything, definitely reach out to Carrie or myself, and we can just confirm and send that email to let you know we've received it. Not a problem at all.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Great, and it looks like with that, we will transition back to Elaine.
So we do have a closing poll question. We just were wondering in what areas you think you might need additional clarification or assistance, so we can plan our work and also talk to the folks at CPIR and PTAX to find out what you might need support with.
And there's a couple of things that I just want to mention once people answer the poll. I just want to make a couple of comments. Somebody asked whether or not you still need to do your annual report, and the answer is yes, you always have to do your annual report. Whether or not you're chosen for this is another issue. Just so you know. And then the other issue I want to mention is people always ask, well, you know that if you're one of the centers chosen, will you know what your score was? And the answer is no. This is not about individual centers and individual centers' work. This is about the overall program. We do not tell people what their scores are. The people who get very high scores that we choose and for being the exemplars know they got a high score, but that's all they know, that they were chosen to be an exemplar. And let me also say that sometimes we choose people who are exemplars because they got a high score and they haven't been chosen before. So that doesn't mean if you weren't chosen to be an exemplar, you didn't get a high score. It's just that we try to spread the love around so that many people know the kind of work that they've done and have different kinds of examples of the work. But no, you will never know what your scores are on this. No matter what, because this is a measure of the entire program, not of individual centers.
Carmen, except if we meet 100%.
Well, true. Then you know.
Then you'll know that you have a high quality score. So there's the goal.
If you have 100%, then you know you got your scores somewhere between 6 and 9 for each of the three measures. But that's all you'll know. Exactly. So yeah. And we don't call people who don't meet that criteria either. So you're not called out in that way at all. All right.
Want to show us the poll results, Paloma?
Yeah, it's description guide. Or no additional support. Okay.
Okay. Well, I think that that covers it for today, unless there's anything else, Carmen, that you need to share.
No, not really. I mean, I'm looking through some of the comments. Somebody said it would be nice to know the score to share with your staff, and possibly, but that's the way it's been and that's the way it's going to stay. So we will not be providing that kind of direct feedback. So I think that's it. So thank you everybody for participating and for listening to this. I will say that the other thing I want to say is the regionals know if somebody asks the questions and they did not participate in the webinar, the first stop is to listen to the webinar and then go to the regionals with your support. So you've already done that first step, and good luck with your submissions this year.